Hello again, my friend. It's Todd Cetnar, your mental performance coach, and welcome back to the Three Pillars of Elite Results long-form podcast, where each week we bring in a very special guest here on Wisdom Wednesday. Today we welcome in Casey Jacox. Casey is a speaker, author, executive coach, and podcaster, or should I say dadcaster, because Casey is the founder of the Quarterback Dadcast, which, by the way, I had the opportunity of being on very recently, and you can find that episode on Spotify, Google, YouTube, or Apple. You know, Casey helps individuals and teams learn new habits of success and unlock and unblock the skills they already have. We're going to talk about Casey as the mentor and coach, Casey the father, and of course, we're going to talk about Casey the author. He has a Amazon #1 new release book called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. We will dive into the 6 common sense strategies to succeed in life and in business. Let's go. Casey, welcome to the Three Pillars of Elite Results podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, my man.
No, I'm honored to be here, and I wouldn't be here if the professor didn't bring us together.
Agreed. We have to give a shout out to Zev Young. A lot of my listeners know who Zev is just because of our time together as good friends. And Zev, as Casey just mentioned, is a professor at Bentley University for an effective selling course, which he teaches young adults and students, basically juniors and seniors that want to get into sales. He teaches them how to do it the right way, because Zev also is an executive leader with a big time pharmaceutical company in Novartis. And so shout out to our good friend Zev, who obviously connected you and I. And ironically, thinking of connection, right? My listeners know my second pillar is leadership. The first skill under leadership is connection, or connecting with people. And I think we should probably start there. The fact that you and I got connected together through the fact that we both kind of talk about my way of saying is mental performance. We're going to get into how you speak to people, what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and ultimately I want to get into the book as well. So we're on a similar track is what I'm trying to say. But why don't we do this, Casey? Why don't we start by just give my listeners a little chance of background of who you are, like who you are, where you've been, how you grew up, so they know who they're listening to today.
Yeah, you bet. I'd say I grew up middle class. Family we didn't take a ton of vacations. Our vacations were camping. Yeah. Played all the sports. I look back, I don't remember my mom or dad putting like intense pressure, that there's so much pressure on kids now. And so my wife and I we try our best to not be too over the top, but just like helping create clarity for helping our kids, whatever their goals are, help them set goals, achieve goals, those types of things. But former college quarterback. For those that scoring at home, no Napoleon Dynamite. Every time I mention my quarterback days, I got to give love to Uncle Rico. Yeah. But joking aside, had an awesome time at Central Washington. An injury really led me there. But amazing teammates. Got to play with a guy named Todd Cetnar. He played in the league for 17 years. I backed him up my first 2 years and was a 3-year starter before I went on to get into the business world. I spent 20 years at a company called K-Force. K-Force bought Hall Kenyon in the June of 2004. I was lucky to be right guy, right time, right account, but I was one of our top seller nationally for 10 consecutive years, moved into an executive leadership role, and then left in March of 2019 to really explore what was next, which I didn't know. I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to start a podcast, and then coaching and speaking found me. But more importantly, I'm a husband. My wife and I have been high school sweethearts. We'll celebrate 24 years in February. And then I have a 16-year-old son who is a smart ass. And my buddies call him the Adam Schefter of Tullahoma High School because he's always breaking sports stories. And then my daughter, who we joked before, has got a nice little shiner today. She's by far, the toughest one in our family. She's a scrappy little 5'3" guard that plays like a 6-foot post sometimes. She's like the Shih Tzu that tries to box everybody out and get boards.
That's awesome. Well, we should talk about Riley for a minute. We were talking offline, but one of the reasons why I bring in certain guests, especially like yourself, is my whole theme around what I do, and my listeners know this, is what do you do when you face adversity, right? And as a 9th grader, we were talking about Casey's daughter, Riley, playing hoops, and he had a great story. I'd love for you to retell it for our listeners who also have young kids looking to compete in sports.
Yeah, well, I think, the great Tony Bennett, coach for Virginia. I'm going to paraphrase his quote, but he says, adversity is life's golden ticket. And I could not agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, I look about all the adversity I went through in my life. As I think about adversity now, instead of like freak out, the world's ending, I think about, man, what a gift. Something's going to be awesome from this. And we got to slow down to like find it and be patient with it. And, you know, I work hard on not being that dad that's like the car ride home, the freak out, the intensity, but more about just like asking questions and helping them realize what's important to them. Because our end game is not how many points they score, how many rebounds they get, but are they a good person? Did they shake someone's hand? Did they look them in the eye? Are they being their best version of themselves? So I always tell myself that a lot, just because I think it's important. But yeah, Riley had a game where I thought she didn't play as well as she could. And the 5% times I'm not my best version of myself, I kind of got wrapped around the axle a little bit and turned into a positive night because we watched film together. I asked her if I could watch film and understand how she watches film, because that's the first thing she does after a game, gets right into huddle. Yeah. And we watched it, and I was so impressed. She literally was slowing the play down. She hit pause. She was like, okay, she's thinking through where she should go. I'm like, oh my God. And no one's taught her that. I mean, that's just how she's wired, which I was like, that's sweet. But there's a couple plays where I remember myself like, Riley, what are you doing, girl? Instead of like freaking out, I just asked questions, and she's like, she ended up coaching herself. And so fast forward that adversity, that moment that she faced, for her, I mean, it's a small version of adversity, but this past Friday, she ended up playing out of her mind, like one of her most well-rounded games. I think she had 10, but she had 6 steals, 6 tie-ups. There's just, and one of my buddies said, I need to change Riley's name to That's My Ball. Yeah. And, but the funny thing is, hoops aside, her team played great. The team won. She played great. But what she's most happy with is nothing to do with a stat line. She's most happy about the black eye she got in the game.
Right.
And we never knew. I mean, I saw she got poked. I didn't think anything of it. And then that night, on Friday night, all of a sudden, I'm like, dang, right, you got a little shiner. She's like, I do. Oh my God, this is the best.
That's awesome.
And then it kind of went down. And then Saturday morning, it was pretty prevalent.
Worse. Yeah.
And then today, now it's Monday, whenever this will come out, but Monday, it was pretty good. She was like, I can't wait to show my friends.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's certainly a proud moment for you as a dad, and it's a good segue into, I would like to talk about the podcast a little bit, being that I was a guest on a few weeks ago, and I appreciate you having me on. And we're reciprocating today, but talk to me about how you started the Dadcast. I don't want to steal the story or your thunder. We know you lost your dad, I think a year or two ago. So let's talk about the story, the impact your dad had on you, and ultimately what the podcast is all about.
Yeah. So I started, the first time I ever got into podcasting was like at an internal podcast at K-Force back in 2017, 2018. And it was just mainly me interviewing some of our top performers and just learning more about it. And then when I realized I wanted to start a podcast, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. But then I realized, man, there's not a lot of dad stuff out there. And I thought, you know, podcast, Dadcast. And then I'm thinking, okay, what are dads need approval? We need to be leaders of our home, but leadership doesn't always mean the vocal one. Leaders could be like, hey, create space for your wife to be the star, and create space to make your kids be the star, and really help make influence so you create positivity. And then all of a sudden it kind of hit me. I was like, I bet there's not a lot of dad stuff out there. And there's still not, there's getting some more, but there's not a lot. And I'm, entering season 4, which is crazy to think. And a lot of momentum. But to your question, my dad was, he worked 30 years at Whirlpool. Great. I don't remember him like too intense. I mean, he could drop an amazing GD bomb when he would get frustrated at us. I still remember the old school, like, rocking the Oldsmobile convertible, the Oldsmobile wagon with all his like sales stuff in the back, and him freaking firing up smokes. My dad was a smoker, and I remember like, God, which I can't even imagine anymore. Sometimes you're in the back seat, no seatbelt, your dad's flicking smokes out the window, and just times were different. But he was a dad that always showed up. And I remember that really in college, where we played some really small towns, and whether it's in Oregon or Montana or Idaho or Texas, and he's showing up. And even when my parents got divorced in college, I still remember like Chris Farley and Fat Guy in a Little Coat.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I remember my dad rocking one of those coats that we had to charter a plane out of Yakima, Washington down to Hardin, Texas. Say Abilene Christian we were playing. And my dad shows up. I'm like, I didn't know he's on the flight. And here he comes, and it looked like a fat guy in a little coat. He's a little chubby dude back then, but it's funny, when he passed away in December 29th, 2021, so many of my teammates came out of the woodwork with stories that I did not know they knew. I did not know they remembered about him. And it was just like the best. It was like memory lane of, I think, joke Uncle Rico, but like all those memories we had. And it was cool to see what impact my dad had on them that I didn't know.
Right. Of course. Yeah. That's really cool, man. So, being a dad now, talk to me about the lessons that he taught you, that maybe you're doing today that you realize when you're in the moment, you're like, wow, my dad actually did this with me. And I didn't even realize it back then, but maybe you do now when you're talking to your kids or coaching them.
I don't recall a lot of sports type stuff from my pops. I remember him just saying, encouraging me to work hard, those types of things. But one of the best pieces of advice I got from my dad that I still think about today, and I'm not always good at it. Again, I'd say I give myself an A- because no one's perfect. We're all flawed. But he said, don't go to bed angry. If you're in an argument with your kid, your wife, don't go to bed angry. You have a choice. Like either you can let your ego get in the way and go to bed pissed and say, well, they need to apologize to me, or life's short, man. Be the bigger person and realize, what are we arguing about? Is that big a deal? And usually it's not. It's usually ego. It's usually false expectations or unfulfilled expectations that some people set in their mind that never got communicated. And so it's now all of a sudden it's their fault because they didn't read my mind. It's on us. So I love that advice. And I think about it often about, but my wife and I joke, we're the worst people at arguing with each other because we hate it. We don't like conflict with each other. We like, setting a good example for our kids about what a marriage looks like, what love looks like. And, I don't mean to make it rainbows and ponies all the time, but like, to me, it takes effort and it takes a choice. And, some conflict can be good because it makes relationships stronger. Mm-hmm. But with the times where it's unnecessary, that's where I work hard on not going to bed angry.
Yeah. Well, that's what we call emotional intelligence. Right. And that must've been something that our parents grew up with as well. Cause my mom would say the same thing, and I was born late 70s. And I remember her saying, we'll never go to bed angry. Right. Cause you never know if we wake up in the morning. So, it's this cool advice from your dad. And it's great that you still remember that and pass it on. I want to talk about the book a little bit, just speaking about being with your dad and relationships. Obviously this will be on YouTube. The audio will be on Spotify, but Casey wrote a book called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. It's a really cool book. I haven't finished it yet, but I want to talk about some specifics in the book. And I want to go back to adversity because a lot of the times that I talk to my clients with, and when I do keynotes, is making the adversity your advantage, right? And in the book, you told some really cool stories. The one about Orison Marsden, who lost both his parents by the age of 7. And then he wrote a book himself and he lost it in a hotel fire and he had to rewrite it again. Right. You talk about Tony Dungy hitting a lot of adversity. I remember an example in the book where you faced adversity, where you were trying to get a meeting with a client. It took you 5 years to finally get the meeting with the lady. So, life is about adversity. Every day that we put our feet down on the floor, out of bed, we're going to get hit with adversity until we pick them back up at night. And the question is, how do you handle it? Because it's not what happens to you in life. It's how you handle it. So maybe some examples in the book, Casey, or, just in general, what would you tell our listeners about handling adversity? What are the strategies that you use or you have your kids use to get through tough days?
I think one of the things I do is just take a breath, slow down, don't react. And let's take it. Let's just kind of like give ourselves some grace and like pause and where are we at? Because I think sometimes we overreact when adversity hits and we just get it and the emotion takes over. Yep. But for me, I always, one of the things I tell my clients is stories sell, slides don't. So for me, how do I use a story that helps me tackle the moment I'm in now? Right. And, I'm 46, almost 47. And I think about a story when I was 16 or 17 that still impacts me to this day, which is a massive injury. Mm-hmm. I learned about, something that I thought was mine and then it wasn't. I'll just tell the story quick. I was our starting quarterback our junior year. I beat out a kid that no one thought I was going to beat out. It happened. I was like, holy cow. And had an okay junior year. The quarterback that I beat out, he was on the sidelines, didn't play. Our senior year, he switched to tight end. I'm playing quarterback. I went to the University of Washington football camp that summer. end up winning quarterback of the camp did not happen. I was like, talking about one of the most surprised moments of my life. When they called my name, I'm like, what? There must be another Casey Jacox here. There's like two of us. And I was like, holy cow. And then I went down, got my award. And then the guy said, hey, you're on a radar. You're going to be sending us your best game film, September, October, November. We're going to be at every one of your games. You won't know it. Here's tickets to our home games. Welcome to, I'm like, what? Wow. Like, it just blew me away. And so fast forward to our Jamboree, which is a practice game. For those people who don't know, we scrimmage against 3 other teams. That guy that beat out, his name's Shane. He played tight end. We're just lighting it up in the Jamboree, throwing the ball over the yard, running. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be an awesome year. All right. Last play of the Jamboree, I go back in for whatever reason. Obviously, it was meant to be. I break my foot in 4 spots. I'd have surgery 2 hours later. I'm done my senior year. Don't play. The guy that now, Shane, had to go from tight end to quarterback. The world moves on. And I end up having to just watch. And I felt selfish. I was pissed. I was frustrated. I was depressed. I was thinking the worst thoughts in the world. I was a captain, not acting like it. And that's when I first learned about vulnerability and power of asking for help. And for whatever reason, I don't know why it happened. I don't know if it was my mom, my dad, God, universe. I don't know what it was, but something said, go talk to coach. And I remember telling him, Coach Marty Osborne, I said, Coach, I am so embarrassed by my behavior. My attitude sucks. I'm not a captain. I'm thinking the worst thoughts ever. And all he said was, man, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, did you just hear what I said? Yeah. How can you be proud of what I just told you? He goes, because you're asking for help. Yeah. The fact is, Case, you're a captain and we're going to find your role so you can become a leader like we need you to be. I'm like, what? I had this piss poor attitude. He's like, you're going to go up in the booth and call plays with me. You're our offensive coordinator now. You know this offense better than I do. You're going to help me call plays. I'm like, what? He's like, I'm not joking. And it was like, right when he said that, Todd, it was like vacuum. Sucked all the energy out of me. I was like, oh my God, you're right. I'm getting goosebumps telling this every time I tell it. And I had purpose. I had clarity. I belonged again. Yeah. And next thing I know, I'm in it. And, you know, I would have a couple, I'd get in the, you know, scrap time at the end of the year when I might got my pin out and my boot off, but it's cast off. But it taught me so much about, it's not about just being in there. There's so many ways we can be leaders. And I think about that all the time. You know, I started my consulting business in a global pandemic on accident. I didn't mean to do this. So my kids are now at the age where I don't just tell them like, hey, let me tell you how great I am, kids, or let me tell you how smart I am. I'm like, hey, would you be open to me telling a story of when I went through some tough times? Right. Yeah. And now they're like, they are starting to understand, whoa, maybe when I go through tough times, we all go through tough times. Right. But we have a choice. And I think there's a great book I read by Jeff Olson called The Slight Edge. And it's almost like that wishbone moment. Like every day we have a moment. We either can go left or go right. Well, what's our slight edge? So it's like when adversity hits, do I say, F this, screw that, world's ending? Or do I say, how can I turn this into a positive as quick as I can? How can I find meaning in this to make me a better person, to make our team a better person? Yeah. And those are I mean, I'm not a trained psychiatrist. I don't even play one on TV. But for me, those are the things I do to help me get through adversity. And I mean, we're all flawed, Todd. So I'm not perfect at it, but I feel like I've been in it through enough adversity. That moment alone, I mean, I could, we only have, you know, so many minutes on this podcast, but I have stories for days of business adversity of, you know, whether it's winning massive deals to losing massive deals to getting kicked off an account, which made no sense, to having to deal with it. Like so much stuff that, you know, I think about back to that moment of, you know, the process of going through tough times and then reminding yourself, like, remember the days in the weight room, remember the days you didn't want to throw, but it was raining outside and you got a choice. Either go back in the warm house or do you find someone to catch the ball? I don't care if it's the freaking bus driver, the band member, wood shop, your sister, go throw the rock to somebody, get better. We have a choice, right? We all have 1,440 minutes a day. No one has more, no one gets less. Exactly. So when people tell me I don't have time, BS. We all have time. You just choose your time differently than I'm choosing my time.
Yeah, that makes me think about another part of the book you talked about, and I think it was back with Tony Dungy, maybe Tony Dungy's book, the former coach of the Colts. He talks about being uncommon or having, you know, making uncommon decisions or having uncommon relationships. And the part that you just mentioned of doing things when you don't want to do it, that's being uncommon. But can you kind of allude to what you were trying to say in a book about if my listeners are thinking right now, okay, I want to be uncommon, what are some of the ways that they can do that to elevate themselves and close the gap from where they are to where they want to be?
Yeah, I think the best way I would do it, like I'm a big believer of writing things down.
Okay.
Because then we can see it, right? Sometimes we say things in our head, and and so many people use my swear words, which I'll give you now, which is need to, should to, want to, have to, and can't. We talk about these things we need to do, we should do. Well, those are the ways to be common, is telling yourself these things which are anxiety-based words.
Right.
Instead,
Right.
I choose I will, and I create that smaller list. So, whether it's as a salesperson, man, I need to start documenting. Well, then do it. I will document to make myself look smarter. I will document because my customers deserve it. I will set follow-up activities because I want my customers to know I care about them, and they know I want to help them. Mm-hmm. I think no matter what your job is or what your role is, sometimes I think just journaling. So maybe we create a little T chart. You write down 3 things that what most people do, and then think about, okay, if there's people that are more experienced, more elite, that there's someone you follow on LinkedIn that's, God, how are he or she doing that? Well, write down what are 3 things that they do. Right. And that if we write these things down and they make us feel that weird feeling in our stomach, that's called growth. That's a feeling of growth. Mm-hmm. And I love that feeling. Sometimes it's not fun to go through, but when we write it down and we feel it, lean in on that. Like something's about to happen. Something's about to happen on the positive for you if you keep pushing forward. And even if we don't know about those things, like ask your friend, ask a coworker, ask a leader for feedback. Say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. friend or colleague or boss, I read this book or I read this line about being common or being uncommon. Tell me 2 things you think I do that are common. Tell me 2 things I can do that would be uncommon, that would make me a better teammate, a better asset to the team, a better asset for our customer. And I think when we use curiosity to find ways to be uncommon, I think that's where we all have that superpower of curiosity. Just a lot of it, unfortunately, lays dormant. We don't use it. Well,
that's key. And what I love about the way you wrote the book, and I want to hear more about how this came to fruition, was in the book, I don't recall if it's at the end or during each chapter, you have something called try this exercise. And that's an action-oriented part of the book where it's like, the thing that I say all the time, my listeners know this. I say it's the start that stops most people. And you just got to I don't care. You're never going to be ready. So if you got a toe in the door, 1 foot in the door, just go do something. Just be action oriented. So tell me where that came from, to try this exercise. And I'd love for you to actually give me a big picture answer on why this book, why the title, and where this came about.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was writing the book, someone, I can't remember who, I wish I could, now I feel bad, but someone said, the more you can make it interactive, the more people will engage. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good. And so I'm not a trained writer. People say, who trained you to be a conversationalist writer? I was like, what the hell does that mean? And, but now it makes all the sense in the world, because a conversationalist writer means tone, means how does someone read it when I write? And I think that comes from 20 years of, B2B sales leadership, focusing on how does my customer read this so they want to spend more time with me, engage. I'm showing my empathy, my curiosity. And one of my favorite stories about those exercises is I had a former client who was a tough client to finally win over, but I did. And at the end of her career at one of my customers I serviced, she left. And then she was one of those customers that was always tough, but when you won her, you were in.
Yeah.
And she calls me. She goes, hey, no, she sends me a note. She goes, hey, Casey, I want to give you feedback on your book. And I didn't know she even read it. I knew she left, but I didn't know she read it. And I was like, my first gut reaction, unfortunately, was like, oh no, she's going to torch me. And we are on Zoom, and she goes, hey, I just want to let you know I read your book. I'm like, oh, you did? That's so kind of you. What do you think? And she holds up a page like this. Well, you can't see it for the people who are listening, but if on YouTube, imagine a page full of just words everywhere. I was like, what is that? She goes, you kicked my ass. I was like, what? I said, this is what kicking my own ass feels like. And thank you.
Wow.
I was part of the problem. And the exercises you put me through, man, you made me think about, wow, I didn't realize I was doing these things that would cause conflict or cause anger. I never had the time to self-reflect, and these exercises really helped me do it. Now, I did not plan on doing that. And that's the gift of this book. I've read it 9 or 10 times, either through the editing process or when I did the Audible version, but I'm learning from myself.
Right, exactly.
I'm the author. And so if people can't learn from the one time to read it, I mean, I've read it, and I'll probably read it every couple of years or once a year just to stay fresh with the content.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, how it happened was It would have been 2010, 11 ish, something like that. I was in Dallas and traveling. And I remember we were expanding a footprint for one of our customers. And there was a group of folks who were younger than me.
Yep.
I was like, quote unquote, they're like their big brother. And they were trying to, I could, that feeling when your big brother, you want to make them proud, or you're the freshman, the varsity, you want the senior to look, I was the senior on the team, or the big brother. And I remember telling the team, I'm like, guys, I expect you to win every deal, but you're not going to win every deal. Compete like you're going to win every deal. But more importantly, how do we win a customer when we lose a deal?
Right.
I got blank stares.
Right.
I go, think about it. How can we win a person when we lose a deal? And they're like, and I said, so imagine if we followed up when we lose a deal and we see, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I know you chose vendor X. I want to follow up to make sure you got everything you needed and see if there's anything else I can do to help you with. That's an uncommon follow-up. Yep. Most people, they lose a deal, they screw it, F it, I'm out.
Yeah, agreed.
I go, how do we win the relationship? Well, not the deal. And right when I said it out loud, I'm like, oh my God, that's it. It was like literally if people know Christmas Vacation, when Griswold saw his tree and the gold light.
Yeah.
I was like, that's it. That's the name of the book. And I knew I did not want to write when I was still at K-Force because I didn't think it would have been fair to me or fair to them.
Yep.
And then once the universe spoke to, hey, it's time. I spent 4 months from like, call it April, May, June, July, August, whatever. Yep. And I wrote from 9 to 11:30 every day. So it took discipline, but I was so focused on that goal, mainly because I told people I was going to write it and I didn't want to let them down. Just like when I said, hey, I'm going to be a starting quarterback, or hey, I'm going to be the number one producer. Once I say it out loud, it's on.
Yeah. Put the accountability on yourself.
100%. Yeah. Go figure out. And then I remember asking for help. I had to hire an editor. I had to help people with a word mapping exercise. They helped me with that. But the best editor throughout the whole process, I didn't have to pay a dime to. Any idea who that was?
I'm assuming it was your wife.
That's my wife. That's nice. Right. She was like, at times she's like, not your voice. She was so supportive in it and helped me get it, at the very end. And I was pushing her like, hey, I need you to read this chapter because I'm busy. I'm like, no, you're not. I got to get this book out. And I was getting impatient, but super helpful along the way. But, for people that are listening on Spotify, you can't see, there's a believe sign behind me. I'm a big Ted Lasso fan. And one of the things that I love about the work I'm doing is helping people focus on the word believe, because I think it's an underrated word. If you don't believe what you do matters, if you don't believe in yourself, you're already off to a bad start.
Yeah.
You are. So start the day with belief. And so for me, I know I believe, like, why won't I write a book? I mean, the sarcastic answer was, I'm going to write a book to prove that football guys can't put sentences together. Right. But I knew I was going to write a book, and there was not anything that was going to stop me. And I didn't care if it was, sold one copy or 20,000. Right. But as since it came out in 2020, every day I get more confidence with it from people who read it, are like, oh my God, this hit me. Or I just bought 100 copies from my sales team. And why won't that book be next to Stephen Covey's when I'm 90? Someone's it could be Three Pillars. It could be maybe both mindset.
Yep.
I believe that, someone's going to do it. Why not us?
Yep.
So
that's awesome, man. That's really good stuff. So can you tell people where they can get the book? What are the platforms?
Yeah, I'd say the best way is just go to Amazon, search Winning the Relationship, Not the Deal. You can go to my website, just CaseyJacox.com. It is on Audible. It's on Audible, Kindle, or paperback. I would encourage people, if you are a book on tape person, that's fine. Go ahead and do it, but get the book as well, because or make sure you're in a spot to slow down and take notes on the exercises. Because when you see it in print, it's a lot more impactful for people.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people tell me that feedback, that they listen to it and they go back and like, shit, I didn't spend time on those exercises.
Yeah.
So,
well, again, to put a bow on the book, it looks like this for those watching: Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, 6 common sense strategies to succeed in life and in business. So really cool book by Casey. I want to transition for a minute here, and I want to ask you a specific question. You could take a minute to think about it, but if you were to define yourself in one word, what would that word be, and why would you choose it?
Oh, easy. Curiosity.
Okay.
Curious. I love learning. I love connecting people. I love asking questions and getting out of the way and having other people succeed. I think that's a quarterback in me. I love, whether it's hand the ball off and get out of the way, whether it's, quick doubles right 91 Z scramble. There's a little old school play from Central, like a little Z middle screen and get out of the way. Yeah. I love making about other people. I think back college, I got my I got our beat writer who I would interview. He'd interview me every week. I got him to interview 6 offensive linemen. Now think about that. We had 6 offensive linemen. You only have 5. So why would I have 6? Because we had 6 offensive linemen receive all league honors.
Wow.
First time in school history.
Wow.
And our beat reporter didn't know about it. And so without our offensive lineman knowing, I called the beat reporter, had him do a story on him.
Yep. Yep. It's awesome.
So I just love curiosity. It's the best.
That's cool. Now, again, I feel like people who listen to podcasts and are listening to one right now, where would you send them to continue to grow every day, right? Besides the podcasting, what do you read, watch, listen to from a day-to-day that maybe you can give to our listeners?
For dads, I follow a great blog called The Daily Dad.
Okay.
I believe Ryan Holiday's company does that. I swear sometimes he's a mind reader because I'm like, how did you know I'm going through something?
Right.
And it's the advice I need. It's a very stoic natured daily blog. I like listen. I'm a big podcast guy, so I like listening to podcasts of areas where I want to get better, whether it's, a dad podcast or a sales leader podcast or mindset. I think about Dr. Michael Gervais, who I was fortunate to interview season 1. And I love reading. And again, it goes back to time. People say, I don't have time to read, or I don't like reading. And shout out to a guy named Chase Nall, who's a new friend of mine, guy that I interviewed on my podcast. He had the best response when people say, I don't like to read. He goes, well, you're reading the wrong stuff.
That's true.
And I mean, talk about perspective right there. So I told my kids that. And so I would just, and if you don't know where to get, that's power of vulnerability. Go ask. Yeah. Go ask somebody, hey, I would like to learn more about this. I would like to grow in this area. Tell me where you think I should go. Put it on LinkedIn. Post about it. Right. If people see it and you have your true friends, they'll leave a comment for you. Mm-hmm. They'll help you out. But unfortunately, to your point, it's the start that stops us. We're scared to put ourselves out that first step.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like you just named a lot of people, and those people are influencers for you and I, right? Ryan Holiday wrote Daily Stoic. We are looking for growth every day. And like I said, I feel like people that listen to the podcast are also looking to close that gap. The other thing that I've been preaching in 2023 is I said, you got to get a mentor, right? Anyone who's striving for excellence needs a mentor, needs a source of inspiration. Who's been your biggest source of information or I can't even say the word anymore, inspiration in your life, whether it was childhood or someone you're working with now or reading now? Like, who's been that big influencer in your life?
I think mentors come in phases of our life. Okay. I don't think you can have the same mentor forever, because I think everybody gets kind of stuck. And so you have to stay curious and open-minded to look for that next mentor. So I think about initial Coach Marty Osborne, Coach Glenn Dacus, Coach Glenn Sorotsky, high school, Coach Charlie Canoon. I mentioned all those in the book and the acknowledgments. They saw something in me before I saw it myself.
Right.
I think about a guy named Bruce Brown. Dude's 75. He's a founder of Proactive Coaching. He's the GOAT of personal development. I think he's an amazing coach. His mentors, he spent time with guys like, John Wooden, Dick Vermeil, Coach K, Dean Smith, Buck O'Neill. Not a bad lineup right there.
Good crew. Yeah.
I think about a guy named John Kaplan, who was a customer of mine at the end of my corporate career. He's a beast. He's a GOAT. He helped me become consciously competent, not unconsciously competent. I think about a guy named, Ryan Hawk. He's younger than me, but he's doing great things. He's been doing the work we're doing for about 7-8 years.
Nice. Okay.
He's got a great podcast called the Learning Leader Podcast. I listen to that one. But you're totally right. If complacency is a silent killer, and if you don't stay in a growth mindset, which is hard to do, we all getting fixed. But when you get into fix, how do you get right back into growth?
Right.
And that's where I think it takes, which I call some of our superpowers, which is humility, vulnerability, curiosity, and just communicating. Because sometimes when we don't communicate these things, they get trapped.
100%.
Which creates negative emotion, which creates anxiety, which creates self-doubt. And I don't want to live that way.
100%. And for those of you who don't know the reference Casey's making with fixed versus growth mindset, that's a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Another great book if you're looking for growth. So that's a good reference, Casey. So let me ask you one more question. Then we're going to get to what I call the hot seat questions, where I'll just give you quick hit questions and you'll give me one word answers that come to the top of mind. But if you could rewind the clock a minute and go back to the teenage version of yourself, what's the piece of advice you would give yourself of the things you knew now that you didn't know then?
Trust the process. Trust the process. Don't worry about if you throw 4 picks today. Don't worry about if you have a bad day. Don't worry if you suck at that test. Don't just keep working hard and believe. Believe in yourself. You believe that you're going to change the world. Believe that something great's going to happen. Believe that you're going to inspire people. Just believe. I mean, it's like if you'd have told me what I'm doing now when I was 14, I mean, I sucked at hoop. Right. I was like eighth man off the bench. Yeah. But and get in, I get minutes. I'm going to start launching threes wherever. But I look back and I'm so grateful for the journey I've been on of adversity, of tough times. Wasn't easy. No. Wasn't easy, but I look back now, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I went through that.
Yeah. It's all a part of life. Right. So again, I think the key here is, when you get hit with adversity, it's what are you going to do now that it's happened, right? You can't control that it happened. You can control the next move. And I think that's so powerful. Are you ready? Hot seat questions here. And then we're going to give you the platform to kind of end with, some parting words. You ready for the hot seat?
I feel like I'm in the 2-minute offense.
You're used to this. You're a quarterback.
No timeouts left.
No timeouts. First question is this: last meal, whatever you could choose, what would you pick?
Pizza.
Nice. Favorite smell of all time?
Ooh, coffee.
I love that. Favorite movie? You're a movie guy.
Caddyshack.
Caddyshack. How about favorite TV show?
I think I'm gonna go The Office.
It's a good one. All right. What's your favorite app on your phone at the present moment? And maybe it's something that people can use.
Kind of a bad answer, but LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's good. You can get premium as well if you're looking to grow your network, because I believe networking is everything. What is the background on your phone? If you were to hit the unlock button, what does it look like?
Picture me and my family.
That's awesome. Favorite quote of all time?
You can be right or get what you want.
It's a good one. Let's say that again. You can be right or get what you want.
And you can't have both. You got to pick one.
I love that.
It's a great quote on ego, making sure you check your ego.
100%, man. All right, here's the last one. What's the one song that when this thing comes on, no matter what mood you're in, good or bad, this song gets you fired up. You got the hair on the back of your head stands up. You're ready to run through a wall.
Well, I don't know if I'll run through a wall, but it's the one. It was so easy, Todd. This song is a guaranteed mood changer.
Okay. Guaranteed mood changer.
And the answer is the one and only Toto Africa.
It's a good one. I love that one. Good rhythm to it. Classic. Right. I love it.
Guaranteed smile too.
Yeah, I love it. That's really good, man. Well, listen, it's been an honor to have you on the show. We should do it again. Make this kind of a yearly routine, because again, we're different people every year. We're growing, we're learning new things. And the idea here is to serve people and continue to make impact. And so with that, I always give my guests the parting words, any advice, any strategies that you want to leave to my listeners, man. The platform is yours.
I would just encourage people to realize if you aren't where you are, if you don't like where you are now, we have two choices: either continue down the path of negativity, feeling sorry for yourself, or you say, listen, it's okay not to know every answer, but it's not okay not to do anything about it. So let's go do something about it and ask for help. And if you are on that path of you're doing what you want to do and you are having success, lean in on it. Tell people that, hey, I want to keep getting better. I just swore I want to. My goal is to keep getting better.
Yeah.
So like to your point, I think it's so important to get mentors. And you might be elite at certain thing now, but eventually you're going to plateau. And, I think about my journey. I was, again, top guy at this company for a long time. They're still in business, Todd.
Right.
And they're doing fine.
Right.
And a lot of people probably have no idea I ever worked there that are younger. Right. So the point is we're all replaceable.
Yep.
So now we're both new in this coaching, speaking, author world. Well, let's go out and find other people to help us get better.
Yep.
So I would just encourage people, stay curious, stay humble, stay vulnerable to realize we don't have everything figured out. We're all flawed human beings.
Yep.
Hang that ego at the door, whatever door you walk through, hang the ego. Don't let it get in the way. And keep, and don't go to bed angry, to quote my pops.
I love that. Last thing, where can we find you? Tell them about the website, or if you want to give email or whatever you want to give.
Yeah, best thing, I would just visit CaseyJacox.com.
Okay.
I just finished some new copy work. Shout out to Tanya, my copywriter. She did awesome work.
Okay.
And and my boy Stan, he put some great videos up there. I think it's a great way to show people will get to know me. I like that authentic side. And LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you liked what you've heard today, you want to connect, I love connecting new people. But I would encourage you, if you're going to connect with me, make it personalize the note a little bit. Let me know why.
Yep.
When people just send a LinkedIn request with, I don't know who it is. I usually don't accept those just because I want to make sure it's like, I want relationships to be impactful.
Agreed.
And make it some kind of meaning. So I would encourage people to do that when they connect with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I encourage my listeners as well. Let's connect to Casey on LinkedIn, follow his stuff. He's got a really cool podcast. Of course, like I said, I was on last week. And again, thanks for coming on, man. It was an awesome, 45 minutes or so. And I'll leave it as I always do. Don't count the days, make the days count. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Today is up to you. Take inspired action and don't count the days, make the days count.